I want to tell you about two not-for-profit efforts, and you tell me which one you'd want to support. For instance, which one you'd be more excited to donate to or volunteer for. The first is Unlimited Health's deworming initiative. Unlimited Health provides pills for deworming or preventing intestinal worms. Intestinal worms are really one of the more uncomfortable health issues to discuss in detail. So we'll spare you the play-by-play and the visuals. It turns out that deworming pills that effectively treat intestinal worms are extremely cheap, while actually testing whether someone has worms is a lot more expensive. So what Unlimited Health does is just go to areas with a lot of worms and give it to all the kids, regardless of whether they have worms or not. The second is Roundabout Water's play pumps. In many areas of the world, access to running water is still lacking. In a significant portion of these, women are the ones tasked with pumping water and carrying them back to the village. Play pumps build merry-go-rounds that are connected to water pumps and distribute them in regions without access to water systems, solving two problems at once. With the same piece of machinery, they provide children with a fun and social activity in a central and safe location, while that same energy expended during play replaces hours of hard labor that the women of the village would otherwise spend pumping water for their families, but can now spend on either productive or leisure activities. After hearing about the two initiatives, which one would you prefer to support with your time and money? Take a moment to think about that. It's hard, isn't it? With the amount of information we've just told you, both intuitions seem reasonable. We've run this survey multiple times in different contexts, and participants tend to support play pumps. There is something very appealing about solving two problems at once so elegantly. If you're one of those who chose play pumps, you're not alone. Play pumps received tens of millions of dollars in donations, including from the Clinton Foundation, and they installed their merry-go-rounds in thousands of villages. In fact, in 2007, UNICEF considered investing even greater amounts of funding in play pumps. But before doing so, they wanted to check how things had been going so far. So they decided to survey the participants of existing play pumps efforts. They found a more complicated story. In almost all villages, children don't play with the merry-go-round. If you think about it, this makes sense, as the fun thing about merry-go-rounds is that you push them and they keep spinning at a high speed. They're really not that fun when you need to continuously and strenuously push the merry-go-round to make it move. So what happens? Instead of children playing, the women of the village end up spending hours turning the merry-go-round themselves. But the merry-go-rounds are less efficient than regular pumps, because regular pumps are optimized only for pumping water, while play pumps are a compromise between a water pump and a merry-go-round. So they need to work more hours just to pump the same amount of water. Many even complain that the work has become humiliating, because instead of doing respectable work, they need to play with a child's toy. Perhaps even worse is that when parts break, as mechanical parts do, their replacements are proprietary and relatively expensive. While regular pumps are an incredibly cheap and available commodity, play pump parts can only be provided by the nonprofit, leaving many villages without any water pumping solution for a considerable amount of time as they wait for replacement play pump parts. Unlimited Health's deworming effort, the other initiative you voted on, is, on the other hand, considered extremely effective. We'll return to them in Lesson 3. So why did we tell you this story? The point is not that those who chose Unlimited Health were right and those who chose play pumps were wrong. So what is the point? The first takeaway is that effectiveness matters. It's easy to say it's the thought that counts when we're talking about others far away. But imagine that your parents or partner were severely ill. Let's say you go to a doctor and he recommends a specific treatment. A week later, you find out that most doctors think that there's no evidence supporting it, and it doesn't work. You'd probably start looking for other treatments immediately. You wouldn't say, Oh well, it's the thought that counts. This is obvious, right? Because you actually care about your loved ones and their well-being. Hence, if you care about helping others beyond those closest to you, then you should care about whether what you're doing really helps, and how much it helps. The other takeaway is that telling a promising and inspiring story is much easier than doing something that actually helps. If we want to make a difference, we need to dive into the details and check what actually works. The fact that something sounds promising is unfortunately not a good enough indication of real impact. In the comparison before, we didn't tell you everything you needed to know in order to make an informed decision. But neither will people in the real world, unless you work hard to demand it or research it yourself.